Hello, my name is Dr. Ralph Lewis. I'm a psychiatrist in Toronto, Canada. I work at a University of Toronto teaching hospital. Following is a summarized overview of some of the themes covered in my book, Finding Purpose in a Godless World: Why We Care, Even if the Universe Doesn't. What if this chaotic universe and life are fundamentally random, with no higher purpose? Can there still be hope for humanity? Can there be coherent purpose, meaning, and morality? This book is about countering the nihilistic assumption that people commonly attach to the idea that the universe is fundamentally random and lacking inherent purpose. Nihilism is defined as the rejection or denial of all religious and moral principles, often in the belief that life is meaningless. A goal of this book is to reassure both believers and non-believers that the decline of religion will not result in a societal loss of purpose, meaning, and morality. Why am I so interested in these questions? Partly because of my particular cultural, religious, and educational background, and I've had a long-time intellectual interest in many of these topics. My psychiatric practice involves helping a lot of patients dealing with severe adversity, and has also gotten me intrigued with the psychology of belief. And sometimes things happen in our own lives that suddenly render such questions profoundly personal. In 2005, my wife Karen was diagnosed with aggressive, fairly extensive breast cancer. For quite a long time, Karen's prognosis would hang in the balance. We feared the worst, but hoped for the best. I imagined myself as a single parent and agonized about how our 3 young children would cope without their mother. It was painful to consider how our youngest child, just 3 years old at the time, would barely even remember his mother when he grew up. Karen bought this shirt soon after her diagnosis. She sometimes coped with a wicked and irreverent sense of humor. We are secular Jews who value our cultural traditions and have many religious family members and friends. I was the product of a full Jewish education all the way through to the end of high school. We were also members of a synagogue community at the time of Karen's diagnosis, an Orthodox one at that. This seeming contradiction between non-belief and religious community affiliation is not unusual among Jews. At that time, I regarded myself as more agnostic than atheistic, undecided on some philosophical big questions that I presumed to be inherently unanswerable. While I was pretty sure I didn't believe in a personal biblical God, I remained somewhat open to the idea that there might be deeper religious truths. I was partial to the idea of some level of purpose inherent to the universe, and felt reassured in thinking that the universe might be guided by some abstract form of intentional higher power. We thanked people for their prayers and rituals, accepting these as expressions of caring, but despite being in the proverbial foxhole, we politely declined to participate in any ourselves. We vacillated between pessimism and optimism. Our optimism was not always substantiated. Like most people, I had always had difficulty fully accepting that life is utterly random. I had on occasion experienced the compelling feeling that events in my own life were somehow guided or meant to be. I didn't think I believed in personal cosmic guidance, but the feeling at this time of crisis and uncertainty of some form of providence was quite forceful. As we shall see, such impressions are always illusory, but at the time I could not clearly articulate why. At the same time, I did have a professionally honed awareness of the power of denial and wishful thinking as defense mechanisms. I had seen how these get deployed by people facing serious threat and uncertainty, all the more so when these people's fates are being arbitrarily determined by random and trivial factors that seem to mock the significance of their lives. I was still trying to come to terms with the full extent to which randomness rules our lives. Thanks to a whole lot of dumb luck and some remarkable medical breakthroughs, we made it through. Though one is never really out of the woods with cancer, and we have had more scares in recent years. People have a hard time accepting that cancer is random, and more generally, that life and the world are fundamentally random. My psychiatric work, coupled with my personal experiences, has made me intensely interested in how people form beliefs and how their beliefs shape their sense of purpose and meaning. You could say that one major role of a psychiatrist is to persuade people to be skeptical about their own beliefs. That is, to critically examine the evidence for their assumptions and not to automatically believe their own thoughts and perceptions. Psychiatrists attempt to understand why people believe the things they do, from overt psychotic delusions to depression, anxiety, and common distorted beliefs. We are all prone to cognitive distortions as we try to make sense of our world. Inferences about purpose, intention, and meaning are very much prone to mistaken assumptions. What are beliefs? Beliefs are our brain's way of making sense of and navigating our complex world. Our brains rely on these energy-saving shortcuts to organize and evaluate the overwhelming amount of information we must process and to form predictions about what might happen next. For some of our most important beliefs, we have no evidence at all, except that people we love and trust hold these beliefs. Considering how little we know, the confidence we have in our beliefs is preposterous, and it is also essential. 2002 Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. Our beliefs are influenced by many psychological and emotional needs. When it comes to spiritual beliefs, the human need for order and control are obvious factors contributing to our human propensity to believe in a higher power and higher purpose. Spirituality and religion meet our need for solace, death denial, and certainty. They also meet our human need for purposeful narrative and myth. They satisfy our proclivity for ritual and our need for feelings of order, attained through predictability and purity. These normal human tendencies can be seen amplified to psychiatric proportions in obsessive-compulsive disorder. Normal human nature is writ large in mental disorders. Communal beliefs also have a social binding effect, acting as social glue and enabling cohesion, authority, and societal control. Beside the human need for order and control, there's another less widely appreciated, ubiquitous human trait that heavily predisposes us to spiritual belief. Let me explain. Boston University psychologist Deborah Keelman calls humans promiscuous teleologists. Teleology is the idea that design and purpose are inherent in nature. Teleological explanations assume that things exist or events occur for a purpose or preconceived reason. People instinctively tend to seek and find purpose and meaning in their lives. We are predisposed to intuitively infer purpose and intention in events. Everything happens for a reason, and things are meant to be. To most people, throughout history, It has seemed self-evident that our world is purposefully designed and controlled by some form of intentional higher power. Many, if not most people, would probably endorse evangelical Christian pastor Rick Warren's assumptions when he wrote, "Without God, life has no purpose, and without purpose, life has no meaning. Without meaning, life has no significance or hope." Cognitive science and evolutionary psychology have provided illuminating insights into unconscious cognitive biases underlying human belief. The normal human tendency to over-identify patterns in random noise and to over-attribute intentional agency to random events. The problem is that we are so primed to connect the dots and to perceive intention that we are inclined to over-identify pattern and to over-attribute agency or purpose to inanimate objects and random natural occurrences. Humans are strongly predisposed to see meaning, purpose, and intention in events. These traits evolved to detect predators or prey and to cooperate as social animals. This general human tendency to think that everything happens for a reason, and it's all about me, can be magnified to delusional proportions in mental illnesses such as psychosis and mania. Once again, normal human nature is writ large in mental disorders. The most common types of delusions are delusions of reference, that is, self-reference. The false belief that unrelated, coincidental, or innocuous events, actions, or objects refer to the individual in a personal way. These patients perceive deliberate intention in random events. They detect hidden messages or signs and tell us that certain events couldn't possibly be mere coincidence, and they are convinced that these refer to them, usually in paranoid ways, sometimes in grandiose ways. They present all kinds of evidence that they consider irrefutable in support of such assertions. The problem is that they are connecting too many dots. We are all unjustifiably impressed by coincidences, judging the seeming improbability of an event after it has occurred, and assigning it significance through our egocentric, self-referential lens. In fact, the more eerie and spine-chilling a coincidence feels, the more skeptical we ought to be about it. For a coincidence to truly be remarkable, we should have made a prediction ahead of time that this particular event would occur at this particular time. Here is a tip. Write down your predictions every time you make one, and meticulously record both the hits and the misses. The fallibility of normal human subjectivity and intuition, with all the cognitive biases that regularly escape our notice, is the reason we must rely on the scientific method to probe reality more objectively. What about the relationship between science and religion? Are they compatible? Do they address different questions? Science and religion were traditionally seen as addressing different human needs. Non-overlapping magisteria is the view that was advocated by paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould, that science and religion each represent different areas of inquiry, facts versus values. Questions about purpose, meaning, and morality were traditionally seen as beyond the purview of science, belonging to religion, or, for secular people, to philosophy. Related to these questions are the big questions about ultimate origins. Why is there something rather than nothing? How could something come from nothing? How could order arise spontaneously from disorder? How could matter become alive, let alone become conscious and self-aware? And how could this happen spontaneously and unguided? How is it possible that our conscious selves could have formed as temporary phenomena and then just evaporate into utter non-existence? How could human purpose, morality, and meaning have arisen in the absence of a higher power and without being completely arbitrary? Would loss of belief in a higher power and a higher plan result in nihilism? Before the transformative scientific insights of the last few decades, it could quite reasonably have seemed self-evident that our world is purposefully designed and controlled by some sort of intentional higher power. It might even have seemed naive to suggest that the ingenious complexity that characterizes our world could have arisen spontaneously. The theistic view seemed intellectually credible, even appropriately skeptical. Darwin himself wrote of the extreme difficulty conceiving of the universe as the result of blind chance. Though a universe that cares about us personally, a personal God, is harder for some to buy into, for reasons summed up in the words of Alfred Lord Tennyson: "Nature red in tooth and claw, so careless of the single life." And many liberal branches of Judeo-Christian religions have moved beyond literal beliefs in divine revelation, considering that it is now well established that the books of the Hebrew Bible were written in stages by very human writers many centuries later than the Bible's own claimed authorship. But this still leaves much room for belief in a more abstract, intentional force of nature. The theistic view seemed credible. Theism even made a comeback in recent decades as science revealed the incredible intricacy and complexity of life and the universe. It all seemed too complex, too clever to be unguided. And some vexing enigmas remained unanswered, such as the apparently fine-tuned universe, the apparent paradox between complexity and entropy, the nature of consciousness, and the origin of values. For example, the constants of physics appear fine-tuned to have allowed matter as we know it to form in the universe and enabling the conditions for life to evolve on this planet. Despite many seemingly convincing arguments in favor of a grand design, modern science tells us otherwise about the nature of reality. A powerful scientific worldview has been steadily constructed over the last 4 centuries at a pace that has been accelerating almost exponentially in modern times. In the last couple of decades, several key parts of the overall picture have been snapping into place. We now have highly compelling and entirely plausible models for how our world, life, and consciousness could have emerged entirely spontaneously and unguided. All the way from the universe's origin, astonishingly, to its present complexity. No external or first cause is required, no intelligent designer, and no guiding hand. In recent decades, science has been making astounding inroads into the big questions about the origin of the universe, life, and consciousness, how complexity forms spontaneously and unguided through self-organizing processes, and the natural origins of the human sense of purpose, meaning, and morality. Pivotal breakthroughs have been made in disparate scientific fields. Considered separately and individually, their insights are already radically paradigm-shifting, but taken together, they may actually be leading to a tipping point in the intellectual history of humankind. The new scientific insights lead to skepticism about design and purpose. Current naturalistic explanations of the universe, life, and consciousness are complex, subtle, and still inaccessible to most, but highly elegant. There are now extremely cogent reasons to be skeptical of assumptions about a purposeful universe. Much is now known about how our universe evolved from an initial random quantum fluctuation to its present state. The image shown here is of the cosmic microwave background radiation that can be detected all across the sky and which accounted for some of the static on those old TV sets when they were tuned between channels. It's the echo of the Big Bang. Its pattern is that of the initial minuscule random quantum fluctuation that gave rise to the universe, hyperinflated to the present size of our universe. In the past decade or two, the theory that our universe is just one out of a possible infinite multitude of bubble universes in an eternal multiverse has gained traction among cosmologists and theoretical physicists. There are many different kinds of multiverse hypotheses being further studied. The multiverse model addresses apparent conundrums in cosmology, like the enigma of how something could come from nothing and the impression of fine-tuning. But contrary to criticism from the Vatican, the multiverse theories were not, quote, invented to avoid the overwhelming evidence for purpose and design, end quote. They were, in fact, in many ways an inescapable conclusion extrapolated from the known fundamental physics. And in fact, there are ways of resolving these conundrums without invoking a multiverse. There has been much progress in the scientific understanding of how life initially got started on Earth through spontaneous, self-organizing molecular processes. Many researchers are confident that this is a question that is quite tractable and might be resolved within decades. Evolutionary biology is currently at a much more advanced, less theoretical stage of development than cosmology. The science of evolution has progressed enormously since Darwin's day, especially in recent decades, with the advances in genetics and molecular biology. The evidence for evolution is now so overwhelming that it is no longer possible for someone to deny evolution and still be taken seriously intellectually. It would be tantamount to insisting that the Earth is flat, which might be a bad example, as belief in a flat Earth has been making something of a comeback in recent years. Evolution is incompatible with the notion of an intentional guiding hand. Darwin's work and more than a century and a half of subsequent research into evolutionary processes have fundamentally changed our understanding of the designs and purposes of biological systems and challenged our human bias toward teleological thinking. A thorough understanding of evolution leads to the inescapable conclusion that the organization and complexity of life looks exactly as you would expect it to if it had evolved by unguided, spontaneous, ad hoc adaptations, lacking even a smidgen of foresight or caring. A God who uses evolution to create living creatures can only be thoroughly cruel or indifferent, not to mention inefficient, tinkering, and bungling. Creationists are actually correct on this point, that the teaching of evolution is deeply corrosive to religious faith. The evolution of nervous systems and brains is now extensively understood. The vastly superior power of the human brain is the result of the combinatorial complexity in which simple molecular building blocks present in much simpler organisms have been assembled by evolution. It was not so long ago that the question of what makes a thing alive was just as much of a mystery as consciousness is today. Living things were believed to be imbued with some sort of mysterious animating essence, some kind of vital force referred to as élan vital that non-living things lacked. Yet we now understand that both living and non-living things are only composed of atoms. There is no difference in the kinds of atoms, just their relative proportions and organization. What makes a thing alive is the organization of its atoms. There is no aspect of the mind, the person, or the self that is not entirely the product of and utterly dependent on the physical brain. Disruption, disassembly, or enhancement of brain circuitry, subtle or major, will radically alter any aspect of the mind and the person. In the last 3 decades or so, an influential new cross-disciplinary science called complexity theory, the science of complex systems, has developed. From this, models have been devised to explain how properties of complex systems emerge from the interactions of simpler constituents. Emergence or emergent phenomena refer to how complex systems acquire properties that differ both quantitatively and qualitatively from their simpler constituents. Properties that are not inherent to their constituents and cannot be inferred or predicted from them. Emergence is the opposite of reductionism. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. There is no magic involved here, just complex physical interactions. Emergence is a spontaneous, bottom-up, self-organizing phenomenon of complexity with no external cause required. Bear with me through these next 3 slides. The concepts are, well, complex. A central characteristic of complex systems is organization. The rules governing the interactions of constituents of a complex adaptive system are usually very elementary and operate at a local level between the individual constituents. Complex adaptive systems emerge in ways that are analogous to grassroots political organization that arises at a local level from interactions between neighbors. No one is in charge. The process is bottom-up rather than top-down. The simple local rules of interaction enable self-organization. Complexity science complements the standard approach of reductionism in explaining the complexity of our world. Complex systems can be exceedingly intricate and can seem so clever that surely they must have been intelligently designed according to some blueprint or master plan and carefully guided through the assembly process. But complexity science provides explanations for how all this occurs through natural, spontaneous, self-organizing processes. Complexity theory is now integral to neuroscience's quest to understand how information processing and circular control operate in the brain's neural networks. Those networks operate as cybernetic loops with no single region in complete control. Critical to understanding how consciousness could arise from matter is an understanding of what information actually is. Information is physical. All particles embody or encode information, and conversely, all properties of particles can be described by information. Information is merely the pattern of organization of matter or energy, the relationships between stuff. We humans are organized matter. The human mind is a dynamic network of information. The sense of self is an elaborate illusion. The sense of self is what it feels like to be a highly complex dynamic network of information, recursively reflecting on itself in a cybernetic loop. We are the sum of all our complex, dynamically interconnected brain networks. We are composed of a lifetime of remembered experiences, knowledge, learned behaviors, and habits. We are all of that information, physically embodied in the total network's connections. The information is endlessly cycling in reverberating interconnected circuits, which are constantly updating themselves with new information as the system interacts with the environment. So, what about purpose, meaning, and morality? If these scientific insights compel us to regard all existence as random, where does this leave us? Nobel laureate physicist Steven Weinberg had famously written back in the 1970s, "The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless." Also, philosophers have long pondered how such abstract and intangible qualities as values and ethics could arise from the material stuff of the universe. Even if they somehow could, wouldn't morality be relative? How can purpose and meaning arise in a random universe? We must consider this apparent paradox. How have we evolved to care about our lives being purpose-driven, goal-directed, and motivated, and to care about others' lives being moral and compassionate in an unplanned, mechanistic, indifferent universe? Biological evolution enabled purposive, meaning-oriented human behavior and morality. Cultural evolution refined them. By the way, the terms purpose and meaning are often used interchangeably in philosophical discussions, but they have distinct definitions. Purpose refers to our goal-directed motivation to live and our sense that our lives have an intended aim. Meaning refers to the value we attach to our lives, our interpretation of our lives' significance and importance. Purpose-driven human behaviors are merely elaborations of the evolved drive to survive, attract mates, and procreate as vehicles for self-propagating genes. All living organisms are goal-directed, with or without any form of conscious intentionality. Even a bacterium or a plant is goal-directed. Complex, purpose-driven human behaviors can be understood as extravagantly, wondrously embellished means toward basic reproductive ends. Analogous to the evolution of peacock tails, these behaviors have produced the magnificent spectacle of human civilization. So, why do we bother to do anything? Because of our motivation and reward circuits. Pursuing and achieving goals is neurochemically reinforced and imbued with feelings of reward. This is obvious and basic for food and sex. For more complex, creative, goal-directed behaviors, we experience feelings of reward in complex ways, such as subjective feelings of accomplishment and self-actualization. Motivation is the normal, natural state of animals. Apathy and diminished capacity to experience feelings of reward is the abnormal state. Many specific psychiatric or brain disorders cause loss of what might be called an appetite for life, or deficits in goal-directedness. Specific psychological and social factors can do this too, triggering depression due to feeling devalued or rejected. Regardless of its causes, depression has neural correlates. So, we're motivated about our own lives, but why do we care about the lives of others? What is the basis of the human moral sense? Humans have both competitive and cooperative instincts, aggressive and empathic tendencies. Like many other animals, we are also motivated by reciprocal altruism. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Social status is an additional crucial motivator in primates, serving survival and reproduction. Reputation in primates is established by aggressive dominance and intimidation, as well as by being helpful, a team player, and demonstrating useful skills. In humans, as in other primates, status is acquired not only by dominance, but by achieving admirable skills and making useful contributions to the group. Feelings of self-worth and accomplishment are a primary motivator for purposeful living. Disappointment with oneself for failing to accomplish all one's goals is a quintessentially human experience too, epitomized by this quote, "My goal in life is to be the person my dog thinks I am." Feelings of failure can increase our empathy toward other fallible human beings. As social animals, we are highly attuned to the feelings of group members and adept at inferring their mental states. We also have highly developed mammalian bonding instincts. People generally care empathically about each other, are moved by their distress, and seek to console one another. Of course, people don't always care. Sometimes we are callously indifferent or just oblivious to the suffering of others. A variety of factors can supersede caring, including circumstance, heat of the moment, psychological factors, brain disturbances, sociological factors, past experience, background, rigid beliefs, sadism, psychopathy, and many others. But there is a fair chance that people will care. Most people are capable of caring once they are able to relate to the other person's predicament and perspective. They are even more likely to do so given conducive social circumstances. Getting people to achieve such comprehension and compassion is the challenge, yet there is a fair chance of success if dealing with people with intact so-called empathy circuits. What about meaning? Meaning derives from the physical world too. It is simply the value and significance something has to a living organism, whether it is good or bad for the organism's survival and flourishing. We humans, with our extravagantly embellished evolution of consciousness, have evolved to be a highly complex meaning-seeking species. The meaning we attach to events and to our sense of self is as richly layered and interconnected as our complex neural networks. Will these insights lead to despair, since there is no grand purpose to the universe? Our natural purposefulness and appetite for life gives us a powerful inclination to make meaning for ourselves. Our ability to do so is not dependent on the universe itself having a predefined purpose. And believing that everything happens for a reason can lead to profound anguish and feelings of abandonment as people ask, "Why me?" Existential questions are intellectually interesting to ponder and debate, but they are highly unlikely in and of themselves to result in profound depression or suicidality. There are very many sources of life satisfaction and meaning commonly cited by people, whether they are religious or secular, including but not limited to family, relationships, love, friendships, community, work, career, feelings of accomplishment, creativity, mastery of skills, overcoming problems or personal deficits, recovery from previous failure, fortitude in the face of adversity, personal growth, learning, insight, curiosity, discovery, adventure, dedication to others, service, and all manner of contributions to society, whether on a modest or grand scale. There is endless richness to human experience and motivation. A fundamental source of meaning for most people is knowing that we matter, that our life matters to others, that our life has an effect on the lives of others, and that others care about us. When bad things happen to people, suffering can be partially mitigated if the sufferer has reason to expect that something good might come out of their misfortune, perhaps some positive impact on others. Most people, religious or secular, want to know that they matter to other people, to know that people care about them. So, is there hope for human civilization? Well, we had better beware the potential for catastrophic derailments. Nevertheless, in the long view of history, multiple cultural evolutionary factors have contributed to an unmistakable trend toward more compassionate, purpose-driven societies. Societal progress in our modern era has been uneven and faltering. Catastrophic derailments have occurred along the way and will always be a risk. But the overall positive trend has been a strong, definite one nonetheless. Increasing secularism has played no small role in this, when coupled with democracy and human rights. Modern secular societies with the lowest levels of religious belief have achieved far more compassion and flourishing than religious ones. The comparison is not even remotely close. Working toward establishing reasonably peaceful, caring, cooperative, critically minded, skeptical societies is a realistic, potentially achievable goal. Indeed, this goal has already been partially achieved in developed democratic countries, which not coincidentally are the most secular too. Cooperatively interdependent with each other, reflecting an ever-widening definition of within group, notwithstanding Brexit. Secular humanism is a philosophy that derives meaning through societal ethics and compassion, achieved solely through human action in a fully natural world. From a secular humanist perspective, our task as highly evolved humans is to make meaning at a personal and interpersonal level, with a special emphasis on strengthening human relationships and building more effective, caring societies based on cooperative interdependence. What about religion? Will it still have a role? Many people will continue to need religion in its full belief system. For me, speaking as a Jew, and for many like-minded secular Jews, I continue to practice many aspects of Jewish religious tradition for the cultural, historical, family, and community value of it all, but without the underpinning of any belief. And I see value in some of the philosophical and psychological wisdom produced by countless generations of thoughtful theologians who reinterpreted the ancient myths to inform their lives. In summary, there is cause for realistic optimism for human society. Humans are innately purpose-driven. We care about our lives and are strongly motivated to work toward meaningful goals. Meaning is something that we make, not made for us. This is anxiety-provoking, but also empowering, and liberating. There is a fairly good chance of getting people to cooperate and to care about the lives of others. And developing more caring societies is a realistic, non-naive, collective human project. All we have is each other, huddled together on this lifeboat of a little planet in this vast, indifferent universe. Let's look out for each other and show compassion and caring for each other's predicaments. We live on this pale blue dot. This is a photograph of planet Earth taken on February 14, 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe from about 6 billion kilometers away, with Earth seen as a tiny dot on a beam of refracted sunlight. Humans can and do care, even if the universe doesn't. Our sense of purpose is not dependent on the universe having a purpose. A random world, which according to all the scientific evidence, and despite our intuitions, is the actual world we live in, is too often misconstrued as nihilistic, demotivating, or devoid of morality and meaning. My hope is that this book will help people to see the scientific worldview of an unguided, spontaneous universe as awe-inspiring and foundational to building a more compassionate society. Thank you very much for your time and attention.